This year, you guys are gonna get the Christmas versus battle you have requested for years. The Grinch. 2 of these Grinch movies I had never seen in my life until I decided to make this video. And the other, I saw 20 years ago when I was 8 years old, and I had never seen it again since, until now. 3 Grinch movies? Which one's superior, and where do the rest rank? We are about to find out. Let the battle commence. The story for The Grinch takes place in Who Town, and the people who live in it are called the Whos, each of whom are aligned with the story and its overall message about the spirit of Christmas. And although we don't see them much, they are very kind and pleasant people in the 60s animated version. In the 2000 movie, they are all kinds of weird. They're horny, punks, ditzy, can't tell the difference between a woman's lips and a dog's butt, and the movie tries to give them more character. A noble intention, but I would argue that this kinda backfires and shows what a horrible history they have, and how it was the Who's cruelty that actually created the Grinch. An interesting concept, but the movie never delves into it, and the Whos are never held accountable for it. And the Whos in the 2018 movie are just incredibly oblivious. The Grinch is supposed to have a bad reputation and be cruel to his very core, and that couldn't be more clear in the first 2 versions, but they make the mistake of making him very laid back in the 2018 movie, and they also show that the Whos don't fear him. On the contrary, he is the one that fears them, making his relationship and reputation with the Whos very different. Now if they played into this, that would be a very interesting take, but they don't, and it just makes the Grinch's dynamic with the town feel weightless. As for Cindy Lou Who, she doesn't have a father in this version, and they make her an energized kid mixed with what I think is supposed to be girl power.
Roger that, Mom! Here goes Cindy Lou Who as she dashes through the snow with a very important letter!
But it just doesn't match the innocent child that she is supposed to be in the original story. And throughout the movie, she is trying to set up a visit from Santa for her mother, because her mother works hard and is apparently unhappy. Now you might think that sounds nice, but trust me, it sounds more poignant than it actually is, because the rest of the movie is just full of her goofy shenanigans and failed attempts at making this happen. And the movie never develops the mother enough to show her supposed sad lifestyle, so this thin plot thread is just meaningless, until we get to Cindy's interaction with the Grinch later when she thinks he's Santa, but it just felt very rushed in its execution. She is such a generic kid character and is instantly forgettable. I at the very least remember Cindy Lou Who in the 2000 movie, and I definitely remember her in the special. I will say though, the most unusual Whos are in the 2000s movie. There is just something odd with how they act. These Whos are not at all hipster-like as they were in the original special. They just seem to party a whole lot. It's like Cindy Lou Who is the only decent one of them. I like that she saw good in the Grinch after he saved her life, and that is a good hook for her character to trust him and want to return the favor by helping him back. And I thought she was the single best Who character in the movie, but even Cindy became really stupid and lacked some brain cells. And this is 8-year-old Eric who thought this when he first saw the movie 20 years ago, and adult Eric thinks the same thing. First off, she doesn't recognize the Grinch when he's dressed as Santa, and just when you think she can't be dumber, she surprises the Grinch on top of his large sack, which is in the process of falling off a cliff, and then gets worried when it's about to fall off. This felt like such a manufactured scene to have the Grinch save her and to make him seem like a hero. An idea that I actually don't mind, and I even liked the little moment they had, but I thought the execution was very contrived and poorly written, because this also made her look stupid. In the animated special, Cindy Lou Who was no more than 2. In the movie, she looks like she's about 10, and I expected better from her than to make such jovial mistakes. But this Cindy is dumb. I expected a lot more from Cindy in the 2018 movie. They try to say that she is smart and intelligent, yet she can't even recognize the Grinch. With the others, I know where to stand. This Cindy is 2, this Cindy is dumb, and this Cindy is supposed to be the smart one. Except for this scene. Her character just doesn't add up. Now the Whos weren't really developed characters in the special. They were more like peaceful Christmas hipsters who would always come out, hold hands, and sing. And for a simple story like this, that was enough. The meaning that the special was trying to get across about togetherness and what you should be grateful for really came through, and it's one of the things that made this special so nice to sit through. You get nothing but good feelings from the characters this time of the year, and even the Grinch eventually saw that. And it was all tied up in a perfectly paced 26 minutes, and it was able to very effectively tell its story in that tight runtime. But the movies are 1 hour 44 minutes and 1 hour and 25 minutes long, and they're clearly trying to pad the runtime with a ton of extra stuff, and most of that stuff is pointless. From the new story beats to the additional character storylines, none of it does anything to flesh out or complement the already perfectly paced story. The only addition that I kind of liked is giving the Grinch a backstory, and there's something interesting there, but unfortunately, it just backfires as it portrays the Who's as a bunch of horrible people. I mean, you'd expect this kind of reaction from a bunch of kids, but the teacher too? And this backstory somehow even managed to reflect badly on the narrator as well, which we'll talk about very soon. And don't even get me started on this Grinch's backstory. So the movie with the superior story and characters is the 60s special, the 2000s film, and finally, the 2018 movie. So let's get started with this Grinch's backstory. His backstory explains why he hates Christmas and the Who's. It starts with him being an orphan who lived in an orphanage and how he never got Christmas there. He saw a lot of other families celebrating Christmas with each other and he didn't get to celebrate with anyone, and this made him sad and caused him to hate Christmas according to the narrator.
And rare Who roast beast, which is something the Grinch could not stand in the least.
Even though he clearly looks like he does stand it and wants it the most. Honestly, this backstory just felt very thrown together at the last minute. It makes no sense, the narration doesn't match what we're seeing on screen, it's not well explained, and expects you to somehow believe that this all equals the Grinch hating Christmas in the end. For him to become the Grinch, you'd expect more to come of this story. You'd expect him to become grumpy and mean and angry and bitter, but nothing about this story pushed his character in that direction. It just made him sad and that's it. I mean, if they had no idea how to give him a backstory, then why did they give him one in the first place? They should have taken the approach of the original, which provided no backstory, yet we instantly understood his bitterness towards the holiday. But taking this approach, it just felt underdeveloped and made no sense. Now, Jim Carrey's version of the Grinch also has a backstory, and in this version, we are at least told in great detail why the Grinch hates Christmas, as well as the Who's, and then the narrator just brushes it off like he didn't hear anything.
So, whatever the reason, his heart or his shoes, hating the Who's.
Now this scene always puzzled me, and it wasn't until I saw the animated special for the first time that I realized what this scene was. In the opening of the 60s special, the narrator speculates why the Grinch hates Christmas, with Exhibit A being that his shoes might be too tight. But ultimately, not knowing, the narrator says,
"But whatever the reason, he stood there on Christmas Eve, hating the Who's."
Because you don't really know why. But in the live action version, they show you why, and they still say,
"So, whatever the reason, hating the Who's."
So this line has just been brought over from the original, but no longer makes sense given the new context that the movie has created, making what at first was a very simple line now seem very tone deaf. And tone deaf is kind of how I would describe a lot of the choices that were made in this movie. I mean, did Joss Whedon take over directing this film? That aside, in the grand scheme of things, this backstory wasn't needed. All you need is to open with a miserable green git with a frown and your job is done. The audience has everything they need to know. Giving him this extended backstory is interesting in concept, but is ultimately pointless, and is not executed as well as the filmmakers think it is. Now in the special, the Grinch is a very subdued character. The 2018 version is just wacky and loud, but in the 60s version, he largely remains silent and his bitterness and disgust is mostly expressed through his facial expressions. Like I said, he is a very subdued character. In the live action movie though, you have an actor who is the complete opposite of subdued, Jim Carrey, and scenes from the Grinch that are usually more subtle like this
Grew 3 sizes that day.
are turned into this. And don't get me wrong, this can be fun to watch, especially if you are into Jim Carrey's comedic shtick like I am, but it does lose the essence of the Grinch's character, and it's moments like this where you start to see the actor rather than the character. In the special, he would be very quiet and just wallow in his misery and bitterness. Even when he's aggravated or annoyed, he'll raise his voice, but he never shouts. But in the live action movie, you get a full Jim Carrey improv show. And as much as I like Jim Carrey, This is the kind of comedic improv of his that just doesn't work for me. Now, in the 2018 movie, the Grinch is voiced by Benedict Cumberbatch, and if he used his deeper British voice, then this would be a great choice and very similar in style to Boris Karloff's performance. But instead, we get goofy American Benedict Cumberbatch.
But on this team, we practice like we play. So, let's leave it all out on the snow.
And I'm just gonna say it, this does not feel like the Grinch at all.
Max, are you okay?
The Grinch is supposed to be smart, cunning, and devious. Here, he's just a pathetic loser who doesn't even feel anywhere near as bitter or hateful as he should be. His backstory was terrible, and the movie constantly shows him being too thoughtful and nice, which makes his drastic actions to stop Christmas make no sense for this interpretation of the character. He even says stuff like this.
Go team!
Like I said, loser. This is a wannabe Grinch. It never felt like he had to make a big change, and he comes across as a character that thinks he's more tortured than he actually is. They just softened him way too much, and it really goes against every negative thing the Grinch is supposed to be, in contrast to the very happy town. As a result, when he becomes nice and sees the error of his ways, it doesn't have an impact, because he's already been nice before his big turn. There really was never a single moment where I felt like I was watching the Grinch. Going back to Carrey's version, as improv-y as he can be, even he has moments like this that are great.
Are you having a holly jolly Christmas?
And these are the moments where he doesn't feel like Jim Carrey the actor anymore, and the Grinch comes out. And I would have liked for him to maintain his Grinch performance more, as in these brief moments, I think he really nails it. But then he keeps pulling back into his usual shtick, and it just ruins it. One thing I will say, however, is that Jim Carrey perfectly mimics the Grinch's evil facial expressions, and he makes plenty of his own original ones too. And Jim Carrey has talked about how unbelievably uncomfortable it was to get into this costume, and even went as far as to describe it as being buried alive. And I gotta say, he makes it look seamless. Watching the movie, you'd never be able to tell that he was really suffering under all of that, and he really works that makeup incredibly well. Oh, and the 2018 movie takes the "You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch" song and turns it into a rap, and it just screams of studio executives that are trying to make the Grinch seem hip, and it doesn't at all fit the story and tone that Dr. Seuss was trying to communicate. Now, one thing I enjoyed about all of these Grinches is their designs. You have the beautiful and classic 2D hand-drawn animation of the 60s, the practical costume of the 2000s, and the 3D animation of the 2018 movie. They all have their own unique visual representation of the Grinch, and I liked the design of all of them. But with regards to personality, even though there are definitely things to like about the Jim Carrey version, I personally prefer the more subtle and subdued version of the character, and the animated special really got that down. And the 2018 movie didn't. And that's another thing. What is Hollywood's obsession with making green CGI characters twerk? Is this a new fetish of theirs or something? So, the movie adaptations with the superior interpretations of the Grinch is the 60s version, the Jim Carrey movie, and finally, the 2018 version. Something I realized after watching these two Grinch movies is that they have this desire to be incredibly loud and in your face to get their stories and characters across. But the amazing thing about the 60s movie is that it was able to say so much by saying very little. The animation had so much expression and personality that you could just tell what these characters were like with a single image. And I wish that the movies would have just shut up every once in a while and let the visuals speak for themselves. At most, all you need is some simple narration, and even that was done so wrong in the 2018 movie and was horribly miscast.
It was now Christmas Eve. There was joy in the air, for in just a few hours, Santa Claus would be there.
If I had to pick, the best is the one that kept it the most coherent and simple, and that is the original 1966 version. It had the perfect runtime, the message was flawlessly conveyed, it gave the Grinch a solid character arc, and it wasn't padded out with a bunch of filler to fit a feature-length runtime, which is unfortunately exactly what the movies are guilty of. It's time for the scores. The 1966 Grinch gets a 9 out of 10, the 2000 movie gets a 4 out of 10, and the 2018 animated movie gets a 2. As you can tell, I thought there was a significant downgrade in quality with each movie. What made the 2018 movie the worst to me is that the Grinch was not the Grinch, Cindy was modernized at the expense of her character, and this is the first time I couldn't even get behind the Grinch's robbery. Something that had such a simple and understandable motivation. In the 2018 movie, it just makes no sense. Nothing about this Grinch's character implies that he would do this, so you can't get behind it. He's just too nice of a character. Heck, even when he is doing the robbery, he ends up being nice. So this whole robbery, something that should be so simple to execute, ends up being completely botched as well. And given how unbelievably clumsy this Grinch is, I wouldn't trust him to pull off this heist. And most of all, he's not set or determined in his hatred enough to where you would even care to see him perform this robbery. I mean, he's even nice to Max in this version. In the other versions, he usually drags him around like a bag of trash and treats him like crap. In this version, he is caring and takes his feelings into consideration from the very start when he's supposed to be at his very worst.
All right, I'm sorry. You're a good dog. What would you like to do?
They even make Max becoming the reindeer an honorary act rather than an act of cruelty. The 2000 movie got a lot of stuff wrong, but it got the Grinch's hatred down, the relationship between him and the Who's, and even Cindy's purpose. The 2018 movie just gets everything wrong, and the original special gets everything right. Hence it is the superior version. And with that, we have reached the end of another year. The channel has had some big growth this year, and so has my Patreon, so a huge thanks to all of you for continuing to watch. This channel wouldn't be what it is without you. And also, I have a bonus Christmas video for you guys. If you head on over to my Patreon, you will see a Let's Watch the Grinch video where I watched the 1966 animated special. And soon, I will release my Let's Watch Jim Carrey's The Grinch video as well. You will see my reaction to watching those movies for the first time, as well as the notes I was taking in preparation for making this Grinch versus video. So you got a Christmas special video on YouTube and some Christmas special bonus videos on Patreon as well. Like I said, the channel has had some big growth this year. With that, I hope you all have an amazing holiday, I hope you all got the Christmas gifts you wanted, and I will see all of you very soon. Take care and Merry Christmas.